Welcome back to Fast Market here on the Schwab Network. It's time for our cash tag segment. For that, let's bring in our next guest. That's going to be Andy Swan. He's a co-founder of LikeFolio. Welcome back to the show, Andy.
Thank you.
So it seems like, Andy, just over a year ago, we were talking about Abercrombie and Fitch, and the shares were spiking to all-time highs. It was the hot apparel retailer out there. It's pulled back about 33% so far this year. I mean, it's been under some pressure. Is this just different tastes in consumers? Or are they the company executing wrong here?
No, I think the stock just got ahead of itself. Now I think that we're starting to see some signal that Abercrombie's in the right space at the right time. And I think they're going to be in a pretty good spot for the next 3, 6, 12 months. And one reason why is the Hollister brand. This is the teen brand. It's really powering the company's growth engine. It's offsetting the weakness in the flagship brand, which is Abercrombie, and capturing market share as peers falter. Hollister web visits up 57% year over year, which is outpacing Urban Outfitters and Anthropologie. People really like what Hollister's offering, and that's this move away from athleisure and towards denim is very real. And it's not just Sydney Sweeney's great jeans that's driving this move. It's actually kind of coming from the bottom up of the fashion industry, and teens really getting on this bandwagon as well. And so, Hollister's in a really good spot. We see Abercrombie & Fitch kind of keeping up, turning around a little bit. And I think the stock is heavily discounted here. Q1 sales were $1.1 billion. They raised full year growth guidance. But like you said, shares are down. I think there's a lot of tariff fears here, but the company seems to be executing against that pretty well. They've got a nice NFL partnership that's starting to gain traction. But overall, I think the big story here is that they have the hot teen fashion brand. And anytime you've got that, it's really worth noting, because that's a lot of times where fashion movements start and where brands get built from that kind of bottom up. And so Hollister doing all the right things, we think, for Abercrombie & Fitch going into earnings here.
Andy, they have the hot fashion trend again, right? Is part of this nostalgia, or is part of this big box versus small premium stores? Is this mall versus big box away from the mall? What do you think it is? Or this company, despite everything we're saying, they're buying back a bunch of stock. They're managing their business extremely well. And if they've revitalized these brands, heck, I just bought a pair of Nike waffle trainers that Nike has brought back on. So what's old is new again, Andy, and nostalgia is a real thing. And I just want to know, is that working, right? Are they reinventing themselves and bringing that back? Because these brands, I've got older children, and this is what they wore, and now they're back again. That's a pretty good story.
Yeah, I agree. I think you hit on a lot of key themes there. I think, nostalgia is definitely part of it. There's this, growing sense of loss, I think, that is resonating across social media, whether you're, 50 years old, 60 years old, or 15 years old. You kind of look back at some of the clips and videos and movies and music videos from the 80s or early 90s, and there's some nostalgia there on the way that the world worked at that point. With people weren't looking at screens all the time. They seemed to be smiling more, having more fun, and look at the way that they were dressed. There's a lot of denim. I also think that there's just this move. Athleisure is just very played out. I know when you think of Andy Swan, you don't necessarily think of a fashion forward icon that's going to lead the charge, but I have been calling for the end of athleisure for about 4 or 5 years now. It's really played out. I think people want to get back into something a little more fun, a little bit more durable, a little bit less, maybe, I don't know if provocative is the right word, but leave a little bit more to the imagination. And I think that's really taking hold. And so the brands that are in that space, like we saw with the Sydney Sweeney, it wasn't just Sydney Sweeney coming along, and she's fantastic, but it was let's get back to jeans, let's get back to cool denim trends. I think that's taking hold, and so Hollister's kind of just in the right spot to take advantage of that, and Abercrombie's doing a fantastic job of leveraging it.
Yeah, Andy, you mentioned the last quarter, 22% growth for their Hollister brand year over year. But do you ever wonder with a company like this, where I always look at Gap as a perfect example, where maybe Old Navy was doing really well and Gap was doing horribly. Then Gap started doing a little bit better, but then they started losing market share in Old Navy. It just feels like even though Hollister is growing and they've got that great engine on that part of their business, is there some of that cannibalization going on here maybe? Or is, as you mentioned, American Eagle is probably going to do pretty well due to their, some of the exposure that they've gotten. Is that also, a worry right now for investors?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you got to figure out who's winning. And in order to figure that out, I think one of the best ways to look at it, not just who's winning now, but who's going to win into the future. And I think a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, who's winning in the future is determined by who's winning the true teenage market now. And I think Hollister's doing that. So that's why we get pretty bullish on Abercrombie here.
What's your earnings score on this one going in, Andy?
We're bullish on this. 43, we think they're going to have a good report.
Oh, 43, that is a high one. Anything above 20, bullish on that one. All right, great stuff as always, Andy. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, that's Andy Swan, co-founder of LikeFolio, breaking down ANF data. And as I mentioned, Kevin, stock's down 33%, off about 40% from 52-week